Alrighty, hello and welcome to week one of the SHL Network podcast. Yes, you heard that come out of my mouth correctly. My name is Luke Jorden. I am a previous high school hockey player for the District 211 Chiefs, as well as broadcaster here at SHL Network, where we've done numerous games the last 2 years. And somebody else with even more SHL experience is right across from me on my screen. This is Dylan Ward. Dylan, please introduce yourself, would you?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Luke. Dylan Ward. I've been covering the SHL. I guess this is now my fourth year in a row. I'm a broadcaster as well. I work specifically with the Glenbrook South Club and the SHL as a whole, and I run the Instagram page, the SHL Network Instagram page. And yeah, I'm excited to get this podcast going. Week one, just getting started.
Yeah, and obviously, as much as there's been little games to cover, there's a lot behind the scenes to cover. So we'll be able to fill up our time with this one. And it's very interesting because a lot of teams have not gotten to action yet, although we have seen a little bit of action in the SHL. Let's take a look at some of the recent scores. This is airing on a Monday, by the way. We will air every Monday and then release by Tuesday. So if there's a Monday night game, like of course the rarity of one on week one, as New Trier takes on York tonight, we won't be able to truly cover that one, but we'll be able to at least preview it. But if you look to the past, we've already had a couple of games span starting on Wednesday, September 11th, where New Trier handled Lake Forest with a 3-0 rout. Then Glenbrook North and St. Ignatius got their games going, their first games of the season going, as St. Ignatius won that one 1-0. Jackson Steinloff with the only goal.
And the first period as well. I think 5 minutes into the game, so lots of defense in that one.
And this one comes to shock many, including myself, Fenwick with an overtime victory over Lake Forest.
Yeah, Fenwick, 2 wins last season, a really tough first season back in the SHL after a 4 year hiatus. And don't forget, they had a pretty good season in the CCHL as they are double leagued. But just a tough go at it last year in the SHL, but 1-0. I mean, you can't ask for a better start. Giovanni Senna with the overtime winner at home. Great way to start your season for Fenwick.
And there's a lot of teams that are starting to double league again. Fenwick and St. Ignatius are the two main ones that happen to be in the Chicago Catholic Hockey League and the Scholastic Hockey League. But now we have another edition of one of those types of teams in the IHSHL North Central. We'll get to that later, but Notre Dame is a double league team now. But speaking of St. Ignatius prior, they actually lost in overtime last night. But if you're watching this on Tuesday, of course, 2 nights ago to New Trier Green, we were able to see some of that game on our television screens thanks to Butch Connolly. I was able to catch the overtime, and New Trier looks good as always, but Ignatius, wow, they really held in there.
Yeah, St. Ignatius off to a good start. Undefeated in regulation, 2 1 goal games, including that win over GBN, who, pretty highly ranked coming into the season after making the semifinals of the preseason invitational. And then, the 1 goal loss in overtime. They tied the game up late, St. Ignatius did, but the defending state champion back to back is off to a 2-0 start to their season on the road. And maybe it became 3-0 tonight after that game, which that would be last night to you. But New Trier, I mean, you just can't be surprised, man. They're off to a good start as always.
Yeah, it doesn't shock me at all. So, by the way, everybody, obviously, we are going over the games in front of us. Now, shortly, we are going to start actually predicting the season, predicting who's going to win the SHL regular season, the SHL championship. We're going to look at state championship predictions. And obviously, these are listed as way too early because it is currently September 16th. So we have a ways to go before we hit March. But anyway, I mean, after that, we'll look at outside the SHL. So we'll look at some of the other leagues, put the spotlight on them. And then we'll have our question of the week. So this will be something that you guys can get involved on. I'm not going to reveal it yet. We'll get to that later. Eventually, we'll have special guest Max Anderson, the great voice of the SHL, primarily on this mic as well. And before we hop into everything ahead, just want to lay out the schedule. But basically, let's look at season predictions. And I'm going to start with a biggest disappointment and a biggest surprise. And I'll kick it off. My biggest disappointment of this season, and please nobody get offended by this. This is all just going off of paper. I'm probably terribly wrong, and that's okay. But I'm going to go with Loyola being my biggest disappointment of this year. And honestly, I can't believe I'm saying those words. But, I got the chance today to look through the rosters, and I realized where did Loyal's offense go? They lost their top five scorers. They're returning none of them. So they're not going to have a lot of offensive support. On the bright side, I don't expect them to have I don't expect them to have a bad season. I expect them to fall from, their second place last year. But I mean, you have Charlie Trapp, he had a great freshman year at Loyola. I don't think I've seen anybody ever step up at the freshman year and play like he did, whether it's skater or goalie. But he's going to have no offensive support. So, I mean, I'm thinking Loyola's going to have a lot of tight games. But if they happen to, catch a loss to York or Fenwick or Lake Forest, I really wouldn't be surprised because I just feel like that offense is going to need to learn chemistry and consistency throughout the season. I mean, you're looking at Loyola who graduated 15 seniors. So, once again, my biggest disappointment expected, and this is just a disappointing season for them on their standards, considering they're typically pretty successful. I think Loyola will be the biggest disappointment. Dylan, do you have one on the top of your head?
I do, and I'll get to it in a second, but I want to touch on Loyola for a second. They've had a really interesting last 2 years, right? Because last year they were the number two seed in the state. They were battling with New Trier all season long. And then they got upset in the quarterfinals of the state tournament to York. And York at the time, they finished eighth in the SHL. And I think they were the number seven seed in the state, which resulted them in playing Loyola. But Loyola, good regular season, and then lost it in the state playoffs earlier than some people expected. Then you look at 2 seasons ago, Loyola kind of more towards the bottom of the SHL. I think they were the number six seed in the SHL, and they ended up beating Stevenson in the first round of the SHL playoffs and making it all the way to the final. Or pardon me, they lost to New Trier in the semifinal, and then in the state playoffs, they upset GBS in the quarterfinal, eventually losing to York in that semifinal. So, last 2 years, if they have a good regular season, they have a mediocre postseason, and vice versa. So, that'll be an interesting story to follow.
All right, and then you look on the upside of things, biggest surprises. Now, people might give me some stuff for this one, but I think the Carmel Corsairs are going to jump the most spots in the previous SHL standings this year. Get a
Oh,
load of this, Dylan. They are returning their top 11 scorers on the points leaderboard. All those people are back. You look at
wow.
Deacon Rose, you look at Vavra. Not only that, Steiner and Stanley, their goalies, I mean, they didn't have the greatest of seasons, but they also didn't have the greatest team. They're both back as well. You're talking about a Carmel team that's basically just replaying last season with the amount of people that they still have. And, I think this could be huge for Carmel to make a statement in the Scholastic Hockey League because they are looked as, one of the bottom feeder teams, and this could be a year to change that.
Yeah, when I would talk to head coach of Carmel, PJ Eberhardt, before a broadcast last season, he just kept repeating, "We're a young team. We're looking to develop. It's not necessarily about going out and winning a championship this year. We have a lot of guys coming back." And boy, was he right after you said that. Top 11 scores. Listen, this is my fourth year covering the SHL. There's not a lot of names that I remember from my first year. Deacon Rose is one of them. He was on that team since he was a freshman, and he's only been getting better. I'm excited to see what Carmel's able to do. I really like that pick for you.
And for yourself?
I think Fenwick is going to be a big surprise, and
Really?
like that might be an easy choice after they're 1-0, but a team coming into the SHL is never going to be an easy adjustment. It wasn't for Lake Forest. It wasn't for Viator, Carmel when they came in 2020, 2021 era. But you just have to get a few games under your belt, or in maybe Fenwick's case, one season under your belt, and they're going to be coming in hot. If you looked at Fenwick and all of their games they played last year, they scored the first goal almost a third of the time, yet they only won two of their games. They were leading after the first period a lot, and then they just kind of choked it away at the end. I think that there's a different tone coming into the Fenwick season, and you just can't ignore their success in the CCHL and last season. Then you just look at the SHL record. If they're able to win these games, and that's kind of part of when teams have really bad seasons and maybe get one or two, maybe even zero wins. I mean, the most recent example I can think of is in the SHL is Barrington, but they weren't playing in another league where they were getting wins on a consistent basis. Fenwick, the number 2 seed in the CCHL and the Kennedy Cup finalists, they lost in 3 games. I think that the 1 year adjustment period to the SHL has come to fruition. And I mean, when you start 1-0, it doesn't matter what kind of roster you have. That's going to fire you up, and that's going to carry momentum into the next game and the next game. And I think that they could catch fire here if they have a good start.
So that's actually very interesting. I happen to make a side by side of the 23 season and what I think will happen in the 2024 season. And this was, I did not put any games into context. This was all just off of paper and what I thought prior to the season starting. And I actually had Fenwick at the bottom. So I'm already starting to feel a little bit of regret in that
Wow.
decision. But I will say, I do feel pretty good about my pick of Lake Forest at 10. I think that game kind of shows it a little bit. And, obviously you can't go judging too much on the first couple of games. Everybody knows that. It's no matter the sport. Teams are going to get better. Teams are going to get worse. Well, mostly teams are going to get better, but it's just about how much better they do get. And I think Carmel's already got so much chemistry. Fenwick's returning with a decent amount of players. They lost their main goalie in, Spencer Lezek. They lost Dominic Fosco, their leading scorer. But like you said, they're returning Giovanni Senna, who already had the overtime winner. He's making a statement. They return their other goalie and Cole Alessi, who got a lot of time last year. So it's it's just whether those, the few guys that are stepping up from the lower level, if they can really, execute and fit into this SHL style of play. Because like you said, the skill gap is so different compared to any other varsity conference, let alone kids coming up from JV having to deal with that. It'll be tough, but I do think they could have a chance to adjust. It's just because this SHL is so good. You just don't know who's going to be at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm telling you, a 1-0 start will go a long way. Just because you think about last season, their first win came in December. You had to think every time they got out there for an SHL game, it was, in the back of their minds, as much as the players might not want to admit that. But just going forward in the season, they could lose their next 4 games, but they're not 0-4. They have that win in their back pocket, and they know that it's possible. I think, yeah, Fenwick is going to be a really interesting team to watch. That's for sure.
And now I just want to go through that side to side list real quick
Yeah,
just to
I didn't make a whole 1 through 11, but I'd like to see what you have going on here.
so I want to see how painfully wrong I am come March. But
Yeah, we'll look
as of
back
right
at
now,
the
I got
video.
Fenwick at the 11, Lake Forest at 10. They lost their top 8 scorers, lost both goalies. It's a very new program at the Scouts, and, you know, not exactly in a good way right now, but in the future, they're going to have a lot of young players that can step up
Yeah.
at this level. At number 9, I actually have York, which honestly is not that
Oh, wow.
surprising considering that they were number 8 last year. They did make it to the state championship, but I'm just talking SHL standings right now. This doesn't mean this doesn't mean that they're going to lose in the first round of the state tournament. I think York could do that again, just considering how it's happened every year. But in the SHL standings, regular season play, I think it's going to take York a little while to get things going. It's really dependent on whether their goalie Jack Brown can, keep them content in games because they're losing a lot of offense as well.
We'll see what they do tonight, which is last night for all you people at home.
Yeah. And then stepping up from number 10 last year, getting that last SHL playoff spot is Stevenson. I think they're going to be better, not by a lot. I mean, that's probably the team other than Carmel that we talked about the most. And they're just so
Yeah.
young. You got to kind of let them all develop. And that's what a lot of these bottom teams are. They're still working their way up. And then, oh, you're not going to like me for this one. At number 7, I have Glenbrook South.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. I just don't think South is going to be the same that they once had. I mean, you saw it firsthand. Zach Freemuth single-handedly kept them in some of those games sometimes, along with other key pieces like Marty McCauley, who left. and Eli Kamens, who was a wonderful goalie. I mean, you're looking at a goaltender room that is fresh with two new goalies. So how do you look at that, Dylan?
Well, yeah, I mean, Freemuth's definitely going to be missed by Glenbrook South. Head coach Jim Philbin said that he's maybe the best Glenbrook South hockey player of all time. But they do have, I mean, they made the championship of that preseason invitational tournament. And you talk about a freshman goaltender in Charlie Trapp. Thomas Preston for the Glenbrook South Titans comes in as a freshman. And so far in the preseason, he started 6 of their 7 games. So
Wow.
he's had a pretty solid track record. He only allowed that one goal against Glenbrook North in the semifinal. So we'll have to see how his stats start to look when it comes time for the regular season for the Titans.
So then after Glenbrook South at 7, I have Carmel at 6. I expect them to jump up 3 spots from the ninth spot where they just barely missed the playoffs last year. Then I have Loyola Gold. I don't know if I'm putting them too low, but I can tell you what, on paper, it just doesn't look like they're going to be second, third, and fourth. I absolutely see it happening, but on my rankings, I just happen to see them going down. I feel like they're in the cycle that's beginning to whereas they're starting to pull in more young talent. And you actually typically don't see that from Loyola. They always have artillery ready to go, but I don't think it'll be the same this year. And then at number 4, I have St. Viator. They were kind of in a C. Stevenson like situation, but a lot of their young guns were still competing. I mean, they were number 5 last year, believe it or not, and they ended up playing GBN in that first round. But I expect them to jump up one. St. Ignatius, actually, number 3 on mine. I feel like I'm
Wow,
rolling the dice with this one. They're also jumping up 3 spots from where they were last year. But you look
that
at how they
prediction.
competed, and this is obviously before the season even started. I made this. This is before their game with New Trier on 2 nights ago. For those watching, that they competed. I mean, I watched that overtime. The shots were fairly even. The gameplay was fairly even. I feel like New Trier had a slight edge in the overtime, if even, and it showed in the end. But for St. Ignatius, a team that lost Tiernan Ryan, who was another big kind of Zach Freemuth like scorer. Obviously, he wasn't up there, but he was incredibly important to that team.
Well, Luke, let me add something about St. Ignatius. I just got done talking about that first year in the SHL being a learning curve and how Fenwick last season, in spite of finishing last in the SHL, finished second in the CCHL. Well, St. Ignatius has been dominating the CCHL for years now. I
Yep.
believe they've won the Kennedy Cup now 3 straight years, and if not four, I might have to check on that. But uh, they came into the SHL. They had a pretty good season for their first year in the league, finishing sixth and then upsetting Glenbrook South in that first round of the playoffs before losing to New Trier in the semifinal. St. Ignatius, I do not hate that pick at all, Luke. I think that they're going to have a really solid year in the S.
Another team having a solid year, at least in my eyes, is the Glenbrook North Spartans. I expect them to climb up to 2. That doesn't mean that they're going to make the SHL championship game. It all depends on the playoffs. But in the regular season, I'm feeling they get up to that 2 spot. And obviously, number 1, what do you know? I mean, New Trier is just on pace for, and I mean, look, they beat Stevenson 11-0 in the preseason invitational. So
Yeah.
like they just I was looking at the game sheet on that. They have a couple deadly weapons who will just not let off the pedal. And I feel like New Trier is going to continue at least the regular season dominance. We'll get into state champion predictions later, but for now, let's just go into who do you think is going to win the SHL regular season and who do you think is going to win the SHL?
Luke, I like to have fun with my picks sometimes, but I just I at this point I can't say it's not New Trier, New Trier. They're just the most well-rounded club. They have so many, players to choose from to make all these teams. And their green team, I mean, I want to know the last time we came into a high school hockey season in Illinois where they were not the favorite by like a mile.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they just seem to make their way through the state playoffs with ease, especially with new head coach Adam Cheris now going to be in his third year. He's 2 for 2 with the state championships, but you want to look at not just the state championships, but all competitions that New Trier Green has played in. Listen to this one. In the last 2 years, the O'Grady Cup Thanksgiving tournament last year, they lost to the semifinal. Every other competition besides that, they won. Whether it be preseason invitational, O'Grady Cup on other years, when they went down to Arizona for the Cactus Cup, SHL regular season, SHL championship, state championship. I mean, how can you not bet on them? I just can't.
Yeah, no, I mean, same on my docket for me. I feel like you nailed everything right there. SHL regular season champ, New Trier, SHL champ, New Trier. Until I'm proven wrong,
Right.
that's what's going to stay on the paper. So now let's look outside the SHL. Let's go to my little outside the SHL segment. Alrighty, so now we're going to take a look at outside the SHL. Of course, there are more leagues than the Scholastic Hockey League itself. You look at some leagues like the IHSHL West, the IHSHL North Central, the Chicago Catholic Hockey League. It goes on. But for now, we're going to highlight those three leagues. So let's get going with the IHSHL West. The state champion Wabanzi Warriors, now known primarily as the Warriors Hockey Club. They have a whole new rebrand and everything, but they seem to be the same team as before. Some good dominance in the preseason invitational, and they returned some players like Joe Pianowski and James Nafziger, who had that overtime winner against Chicago North at the United Center. They did lose Evan Ziegler, though. I mean, he was incredible. And then when you looked down the rest of the West, Plainfield had an impressive winning in their group of the preseason tournament and only lost 4-3 in a quarterfinal to Glenbrook North. So that's another one of those combined teams that, makes a decent statement against a top tier team.
Yeah, you got that right, Luke. And in that tournament, 7 SHL teams participated, and the quarterfinals was all 7 of those teams and Plainfield. So there you go. The best non-SHL team performing in the tournament. Obviously, with those brackets groups, you can't necessarily say that they were the eighth best team at the tournament just based on all that. But I mean, hey, they like you said, they kept it close against GBN in that quarterfinal.
Yeah, I mean, their group did consist of Providence, Glenbard, and New Trier White, not the strongest of divisions, but not to take away from the fact that Plainfield has been, not the greatest in the West as of the last couple of years. That could be a big statement later on into the season. And then also in other news in the IHSHL West, the Kankakee Irish, who actually played in the Lincoln Land Hockey League. That's the same conference.
Yeah,
You're familiar with that one
they
with
were the runners up in the downstate state championship. I went down to Bloomington to cover that on the Instagram.
Yep, they actually have now joined the IHSHL West, so they will have
There
some
you go.
traveling to do. And they did start 0-2 so far in West play, but we are early on in the season. We'll see how they develop to that. Who knows? Maybe we'll eventually see some sort of broadcast of them if they happen to
Yeah.
find a rival that they really don't enjoy and they find themselves on the rivalry series or anything like that. But
Yeah, that's good for them. I mean, no shame on the Lincoln Land Hockey Club, but if you're or the hockey league, I should say, but if you're an Illinois team, up north are the teams you want to be playing on a consistent basis, and you know, playing in West is going to be really good for them. And it makes me wonder, are they going to now be in the red division state bracket or combined as opposed to downstate now that they're in West? Probably, right?
yeah, I believe they would be red division. Obviously, we aren't entirely sure on that yet, but I guess we'll figure out when we get there. And then we'll hop over to the IHSHL North Central. I formerly played in this league, so I can tell you everything off the top of my head. We do have some newcomers in the Varsity Champions Division, LZMW and the D155 Predators, who were both standouts in the Gold Division, hop up to the Champions Division. The D211 Chiefs and who I formerly played for, and the Kings Hockey Club have both dropped down to the Gold Division. And
You got out of there just
Highland, what were you saying?
you got out of there just in time then.
I guess. We were actually in gold my junior year and we were pretty solid. So then we moved up to champions, but I just didn't think
I
we had,
see.
yeah,
I
a
see.
strong enough roster. And so we were back down in the gold nonetheless. Still a varsity division. And then we look at Highland Park actually leads the North Central right now. Obviously, we're very early on, but they're off to a strong 2-0 start, 15 goals in their first two games. And then Chicago North loses their senior core this year. I don't know if they're going to be the same, but that's another thing where you're going to have them play some games before you can really decipher. And now the Chicago Catholic Hockey League. Not a
Yeah.
lot has changed. Notre Dame does join Fenwick and St. Ignatius as a double league team. They're playing in the North Central and CCHL, but not much has happened on up to this Monday night that we know of yet. So we will follow with these three leagues as the season goes on more and more, eventually make champion predictions, all of that type of stuff. But for now, we just thought we'd give them a little spotlight and
Mhm.
let the rest carry us through. So
Absolutely
now,
thrilling Kennedy Cup last year as well, the championship series for the CCHL, St. Ignatius.
absolutely. It's always been pretty good. I think you called one of them and it went to double overtime and what was it, game two, game three? I forgot who the teams
Yeah,
were, but you were there
I
for that.
was I was actually sidelined for that one, but I have called some long double overtime games in the CCHL, and in the CCHL playoffs, they don't do the 10 minutes for overtime. They do the full 17-minute periods, 5-on-5, which is really feels like NHL style, which is really fun.
Next up, before we go to our state championship predictions, we're actually going to talk with the voice of the SHL for numerous years now. Max Anderson will be joining this call to talk about the future of the SHL. He'll also give us a little bit of the history, and it's really interesting. You're going to want to listen, so we're going to send it over to that right now. Well, why not for the first episode of the SHL Network podcast, bring in the voice of the SHL himself, voice of the state championship for the last 2 years, and he's done a ton of games in the last couple years prior. I mean, Max, how are we doing today?
Doing good. We're getting close to the hockey season. I did some soccer broadcasting over the summer, still working with the Fire. Some stuff now with UIC men's soccer as well. But you guys know my heart lies in hockey, so I'm excited to get back and get started here in the next month or so.
And so you talk about how, well, actually, just to tee things off to start, how did you come up with this SHL network idea? I know this goes a ways
Yeah,
back, but I've never heard the full story, and I
sure.
don't think anybody else watching has. So,
Yeah, we should probably get it on the record, right? So it really started when I graduated from college. I was a finance major. I work in enterprise sales as my full-time job. Believe it or not, I'm not a full-time broadcaster as much as I wish I was. I was graduating from college, and I knew Evan Polakidis, and he had mentioned that the league was looking to stream some games and have a game of the week type of thing. And I, throughout college, did broadcasting at a sports radio show at the student radio station. I worked a little bit of Big Ten Network at part of their BTN Plus program, Luke, which I know you're now a part of, which is awesome, which I just think is such an incredible program. And when I graduated, I was going into full time into the corporate world, but I still had this itch to broadcast, so it's perfect. And funny enough, it very much started with a podcast mic, just almost exactly like you have in front of you, Luke. Was my play-by-play mic and the network's first color guy, Taylor Rammelt. We literally passed the mic back and forth. So I would call a play, and I would literally hand it over to Taylor between puck pauses to commentate. Right. It was Jimmy the Wiz's personal camera that we used, and that was my work laptop. So it was rugged, right? And I'll never forget one of the first games we did was a New Trier Loyola game at Centennial. This would have been probably winter of 2016. And it was so loud in there as I was doing play by play. I couldn't hear anything Taylor was saying in terms of commentary because we didn't have headsets. I couldn't actually hear him, and we were, 2 feet away from each other.
Mhm.
So that was kind of a fun way to start. And then take off. And year by year, it was little by little, right? It wasn't all at once. We got a new camera that the SHL bought. And then the first headsets we had were these big, bulky, black, they look like air traffic controller headsets that didn't sound very good either. And I give Dylan a lot of credit because Dylan actually went out and bought one of his own, a really nice Sennheiser headset or Audio Technica or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And he let me use it for a game. And I was like, oh my God, we're not in the Stone Age anymore in this headset. We've got to get these for the league. So I went to Evan. I said, Evan, it's going to be like $800 for two of these, but I'm telling you, listen to this. It's worth it. And so it was that iteration over and over. It was more cameras. It was a new computer. It was better streaming software. It was bigger soundboards so that we could have more mics a part of the broadcast. It was wireless mics. It was wireless receivers. It was a slow iteration over time that really built on itself. And I give so much credit to Evan Polikitis and to all the head coaches that have been around the SHL for in my time now, almost 10 years, 9 years now, that saw the vision, saw it continue to grow, and said, we need to keep doing this. And it's just been little by little, and the support's been tremendous.
And you talk, oh yeah, go ahead, Dylan, my bad.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that day that I let you use that headset, I was broadcasting the game with you as color, so I gave you that headset, and I used that, like you say, air traffic control. And if there's any sleuths out there watching this, if you go back, the very first broadcast in CCHL network history was that game in question,
Mm-hmm.
and hearing those two like in the same broadcast, especially, really made it night and day between those.
Yeah, it was almost uncomfortable. It didn't make sense. It almost sounded like one person was in the arena and one person was calling it from home. I mean, it was so awkward how different it was. And fortunately, a lot of people agreed. That was the first year we did the CCHL game of the week, which was, I believe, 2021, the year after COVID. And the CCHL was great. I know I mentioned a lot of the SHL, but the CCHL bought us a few things too along the way. We're trying to see if we can get them back in the fold as well. And there's some games we'll be doing with them through some partners, but they were a huge part of the growth of what it is now J&M Media. I'm sure people have heard me reference J&M Media. I'll tell that story really quick. Essentially, after we did the state championship at Bensonville in 2022, we sat down with the Blackhawks afterwards, and they were basically like, so who are you guys? Do you have a company? Do you work for the SHL? We're like, well, technically we're contractors for the SHL, but the SHL it didn't make any sense. So we said, me and Jimmy got together and said, it's time to make an LLC. And so to be clear, me and Jimmy are not retiring off this LLC. We barely make budget every year. It's a struggle, but we think it's important to make sure that the people that work for us, we pay well. I think that's a huge problem in this industry. Luke, you're starting to learn it. Dylan, you certainly understand it, that there's a lot of people that want a lot of people to do free work, and I just don't believe in that at all. So I really push teams and leagues to say, hey, if you want good product and good talent, you're going to have to pay for it.
Well, obviously, Max, you talked about how from 2021, you guys had the different set of headsets, and you could tell the difference. Now, SHL Network looks like a pro production, and obviously you have a lot of people you'd like to think, but just who has helped you the absolute most throughout this process?
Well, it wouldn't happen without Jimmy the Wiz, right? And just the divvy of responsibilities, right? Jimmy's the tech guy. Jimmy is probably the most talented producer I've worked with at this point. I've worked professional soccer. I've worked college sports. You have no idea how good Jimmy is at what he does. Yeah. I've seen literally pro producers that aren't as good as what Jimmy does. And there's a reason he does some side work for CBS and some side work for other networks too. He is unbelievably talented, and we are so unbelievably lucky to have him. But I went to him as the laptop that the league bought. I think that was in like 2019. And we started to have crashes. We started to have issues because we were at 4 cameras. We had 1080 HD, and anybody that has any technical background understands the more resources you put on a computer, it's just going to crash more. So I said, Jimmy, what do we need to do to fix this? He said, well, I can build my own computer. I'm like, okay, I love that. What's it going to cost? I said, well, yeah. Jimmy, give me a number. Give me a number, and I'll go find it for you. I said, okay, give me the number. And I basically went to the teams in the SHL and said, look, I said, we've been doing this for 8-9 years, and we've done a great job, but we think we can do an even better job. And for not a lot of money, a couple $100 a team, Jimmy will build this thing. And again, Jimmy, unbelievable. He didn't take a dollar to himself. Like, it was a project that he wanted to do to build this computer. It would have cost probably 3 times as much if we went out and got it professionally built. But Jimmy said, no, I'll build it. I want to build it the way I want to build it. And yeah, all 11 SHL teams last year kicked in an equal amount of money. And this is a computer now that should last the league, around a decade. Whether I'm still here, Jimmy's still here, or any of you two are still here doing this, that computer that the league bought last spring, it changes the game in terms of the quality of the broadcast we can bring.
Not only that, Max, it's pretty too. All the lights he has going on in there, yeah. And then see-through windows.
Yeah, I asked Jimmy, I said, is it a problem that we can see all these things? He goes, no, it actually makes it easier if anything goes wrong. I just have to pop open the hood and I can see the whole Again,
Yeah,
it's
wow.
not my area of expertise, so I have no idea what I'm looking at. But I agree, Dylan. It looks cool.
Wow. I mean, I already appreciated Jimmy so much. I did not even know that he built that computer by himself. That is,
Let me caveat, he had some help, like some advisors. Like I know Gerard helped him a little bit. For those of you who don't know, Gerard Boris, who does a lot of the broadcast work for GBS, has become a great friend of the network. I believe a couple of friends of Jimmy's and contacts that have, I think one of his cousins has built lots of computers too. So he had help, but it was his vision. He was the owner of it for sure.
well, lastly, um, are there any, big things that we should know
Yeah.
about right now for the network or just for, anything? Are we going to see the barn hockey bar kick off once again, or are there
The plan is for the
anything?
kickoff. We do have a tentative date for it. We're still working through some details on that, so nothing finalized there. But we loved the event last year. It was a huge hit. We had a huge turnout both locally and on the stream on the recorded. And we think we found a date where no SHL teams have a game, and it works for the barn. So we're really excited. We hope we can get everybody from every team there, pack the place. We've worked through some AV issues that we learned last year. Obviously, the barn's done some live events since, so they've got all that down. So that's all back in play. The rivalry series is going to be back across the state. There's an SHL component of that. J&M Media is going to be leading that with the Blackhawks. Um, there's some stuff in the works with the Wolves, with some other local hockey initiatives that we're still in contact with. Kind of trying to finalize that here by the end of the month. Of course, once you get into October, everybody's seasons start, and that's where it gets really hard to plan more. So we're really in this 2 week push between now and the end of the month to get some of those plans locked down. Again, as the network's grown, as our resources have grown, as our technology's grown, so has the complexity of planning all these things. It used to be, like I said, we showed up with a laptop, a mic, and my work computer, and off we went. There's a lot more involved, both from a personnel standpoint, logistics standpoint, partnership standpoint, legal standpoint. I've looked at more legal contracts in the last 2 years, and I never thought I would doing freelance sports broadcasting, but I do it because I absolutely love it, and I think it's an underserved market and continues to be an underserved market here in Illinois.
Well, I mean, that's pretty incredible that you found a date that all hockey teams can make. I don't even think families
Cross my
can
fingers.
find
Not locked in yet.
I
Not locked
don't
in.
even think families can find dates where their own players can hang out with their family or anything along those lines. So that's incredible. We are incredibly excited for another year where it's just going to be some of the best broadcasts in high school hockey you're going to see. Max will lead it all. You can check out everything at
If I could
SHL
say one more
Network.
thing, Luke, before you sign me off, I
Sneak that in.
appreciate you two so much because I've had so many people come to me with this idea. They said, Matt, start a podcast. People think you just roll out of bed and make a podcast. I said, guys, you don't realize how much time and effort this takes. I would love to contribute. I'd love to help guide. I don't have another media project that I can take on myself. So, Luke, Dylan, I really appreciate you two taking this by the horns. I think it's going to be a really cool thing for the league, for the state, for high school hockey. And anytime you guys need any advice or need me on to talk about anything, my number, and always happy to come on.
Yeah, you're always welcome to come on, especially leading up to a big game week, big
Yeah,
broadcast. Just talk about it a little bit.
absolutely. Anytime you guys want me, I'm always happy to.
Our
Sweet.
pleasure, Max. Thank you for being on this call. And now we will take a look at our state championship predictions in a second. And as always, a great conversation with Max Anderson, voice of the SHL. Very appreciative from both of us to have him on this podcast for week one. It just had to happen. He's the guy to have and got some great information from him there. Now we're going to take a look into our state championship predictions. And let me rephrase that. Our way too early state championship predictions. We're looking, just about half a year out. So we've got a lot of hockey to work our way up there. But for now, let's start with the Red Division state champion. Who comes to mind?
I feel like I have to have a little bit more fun with this. I predicted New Trier to win the regular season and the SHL playoffs. And realistically, if I was throwing money down, that would probably be my prediction. But I want to mix it up a little bit, and I'm actually going to say my way too early prediction. Can't emphasize that enough. Is going to be the St. Ignatius Wolfpack.
I like that.
I'm kind of going off what you said earlier. I really liked all that. They had that first season where they adjusted to the SHL, and it brought them all the way to the semifinals of the state playoffs, where they eventually lost to, I believe it was York, right? Because it was New Trier versus Viator, and then York versus Ignatius.
Yes.
And that York team is a really good playoff team, and I would not be surprised to see them go on and win the state championship, get over the hump. But I'm going to lock it in right now. My way too early prediction. I think St. Ignatius, second year in the SHL, they're going to get more accustomed to the schedule, playing these teams that'll wind up being the top 8, 10 seeds of the state tournament. Uh, I think they're definitely going to be a team to watch out for. So lock it in. I'm going to come back to this in March and see if I'm right.
Well, I respect that. You see, me on the other hand, it's all business for me. So I, as much as I want to pick another team, just the team in front of me, just New Trier, I don't see them having any flaws yet early on. Perfect record so far. Obviously, the perfect record will go at some point, but I think New Trier is going to go. This was a three-peat, right? Three-peat state
It
champions.
would be a three-peat.
Yeah, it would
Yeah.
be a three-peat, and I think they have the weapons to make it happen. I'm gonna go with my pick first for the combined division, and I was
Okay.
looking deeply into this. I really don't know. I thought maybe, and as much as I ache to say this because I played for Chiefs, but one of our rivals, Prep, looks to be a decent contender. They return a great goalie in Ryan Pett, who I had trouble scoring on all year. But honestly, with how much, I mean, this is awfully boring to say, but I said New Trier for Red Division. Why not a repeat for the Warriors Hockey Club as well? But I tell you what, there are 15 teams you could throw out there and say would be a state champion, and I would probably agree with you. I just think the Warriors have the slight edge.
Yeah, and Luke, you took the words out of my mouth, and I hate to do a repeat of your prediction, but I have to say Warriors too, and the reason is simple. They won the state championship. They've always been a big powerhouse in Illinois, and they just combined with Wheaton West to create this new identity. And I think they're going to go into the season with the fresh slate, a new roster and some mixing around with the coaching staff. And I think Keith Farforth, who was the head coach of Wheaton West, is now going to be the head coach of this team. And I can't see them, at least for my way too early prediction. I can't see it not being them after winning it and adding all these new players from what was already another combined team. So now there's going to be a lot of schools involved in this Warriors organization, and I can see them going back to back. Absolutely.
That's an incredible point you make with the Wheaton West combination. I mean, Wheaton West was, a pretty middle of the pack combined team, but I mean, you're bringing some incredible and talent nonetheless. Every school you add on, whether they have incredible hockey players or not, that is help. You can really run a deep team, and, having a deep team can be one of the keys to winning a championship. I like that Warriors pick. And to make myself even more stale and more boring, I don't see who's stopping Barrington in the girls' division either. I just don't. I don't.
Yeah, I mean they were an absolute wagon. The Gorbatenko sisters, which I think one of them is now going to play in Wisconsin, right? Was that Nicole?
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes. Or
Yeah.
actually, it might have been both of them. It
Yeah.
might have
Oh,
been.
were they both seniors? I think they were both
Oh, one of them's
committed.
younger, yes, but I think
Yeah.
they're all on pace to go to Wisconsin because their oldest sister, or maybe, yeah, I think oldest sister Kelly Gorbatenko is already at Wisconsin. That's pretty cool for her because she'll be playing at the friendly confines this year because
Yes.
Wisconsin's playing Ohio State in
Right.
women's hockey at Wrigley Field. I think it's either January 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, but it's a little bit after the Hawks Winter Classic. They're going to leave that sheet of ice down there for some of the college teams, men's
Yeah.
and women's, to play there. So she'll get to experience that.
I
So,
love that. And like when I went to the Winter Classic in 2019 at Notre Dame football field, and I think that they had Notre Dame play there after they left the sheet of ice up. I think actually UNC ACHA played at the rink that was at I'm not I'm forgetting what the stadium's called, but when the Hurricanes hosted the winter or the stadium series last season or two
oh
years ago.
yeah, no, you're spot on. I can't remember the rink name, but yes, that was an incredible turnout for an ACHA game. They had like half a football stadium packed with people. It
That's
was
incredible.
really cool to see. But I mean, that just goes to show you how much traction not only college club hockey, but just any level hockey is getting here in the US. It's just becoming more popular year after year, and it's really a sight to see.
In terms of my prediction for the girls' state championship, I think that this is the year that Glenbrook gets over the hump. And Glenbrook, of course, a combined team of GBN, GBS, and Regina Dominican as well, private school Wilmette. They made it to the state championship last year and they lost to Barrington. I think the final score was 6-2 or 6-1. But
Yeah,
we were
you and me did that game. I believe it was 6-2.
yeah. Yeah, I remember the Glenbrook scored a goal in like the last 10 seconds of the game. But that team was really young, man, and there was a lot of skill involved. And I believe that coming into the state playoffs, they were the 3 seed, and they beat Maine in the first round. And then they faced Fenwick, who was the 2 seed, and that was an upset victory with the game winner coming in the third period at the edge. And not to mention, while that game was technically a neutral site game at the edge, that's where Fenwick plays their home games.
Yep.
Being the higher seed, they were on the home bench. So really, it just was an away game for Glenbrook, and they were able to come away with the upset. Then just couldn't get over the hump at the United Center. I have very fond memories. Again, I went to Glenbrook South High School, graduated in 2019, and I have very fond memories of going down to the United Center my sophomore year and watching the Glenbrook girls win the state championship against Fenwick, which was at the time their first in program history. I think it's finally time for them to do it again.
I do respect that pick. If there is one or two teams that can get by Barrington, just looking at the seeding last year, and I do recall Glenbrook having a very young team, so they'll get to
Yes.
return a lot of those players. So,
I
maybe,
think it was like 3 to 4 seniors on that team. I
yeah.
would have to go back and check, so don't quote me on that. But I broadcasted their quarterfinal game on the GBS network, and then the semifinal I did as well, sideline. I'm thinking back. I think it was like just at count the number of seniors on one hand on that team. So they're going to be coming back full of talent.
Well, so there are oh my goodness, our state
Lock them in.
championship predictions. Lock them in. Love to see myself go 3 for 3, but also for the parity of the state, I would not mind being wrong, considering I picked New Trier, Warriors, and Barrington.
You
I'm
picked
almost hoping I'm
three.
wrong.
You picked three back to backs.
I picked three back to
So the
backs.
three state
Yeah, I don't.
championship spots here.
Anyways, we're going to go into our final segment, and this is where we want you guys to get involved. Comment on YouTube. We're going to have polls on Instagram. We're going to
Absolutely.
have a question of the week every week, and it's going to be related in some sort to high school hockey.
Mhm.
And this one is an interesting one to get started. So, this week's question of the week is Saturday night, packed barn, rivalry game. What team would you want to lace up for?
What team?
Or just like what game would you want to play in?
Oh man, how can I not say Thanksgiving Eve at Centennial and Wilmette? And I see the reaction there from Luke. I think I just took his pick, but I think there's no clearer answer to that question than that game between GBS and GBN. It's a tradition. It's been going on years, way before the SHL was founded. And I mean, it doesn't matter what the records of those two teams are. It doesn't matter where they're ranked in the state. That game gets over 1,500 people every single time, and it's always just such a show. It's Glenbrook South, Glenbrook North. It's always their first meeting of the regular season against each other. And, and as a matter of fact, in the SHL era, there's only been two occasions where they played a game before that game. And this season was one of them when they met up in the semifinal of the preseason invitational. But it's always the first SHL meeting between those two sides. And it could be a 6-0 game either way. The fans are going to be buzzing the entire time on both sides of the barn. It's really, if you've never had the opportunity to watch that game in person, it's something you should consider doing and checking off your bucket list if you're involved in any way in high school hockey, whether those are your teams or not, or just Centennial Wilmette on Thanksgiving Eve. It does not get better than that for high school hockey.
No, you're absolutely right, Dylan. You took the words right out of my mouth. Obviously, I would pick the same thing, but if I had to pick a runner-up in a kind of similar circumstance, I would obviously do, no matter the rink, just first game of the season for New Trier Loyola too, because that's obviously a very classic rivalry. I feel like this
We're getting
question
an
is
early
very
one this
clear
year
cut.
too. I
What?
think I think they face off in October. We're getting an early green gold matchup this year.
Wow. Alrighty. I'll take that. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I we will have more, you know, vast questions come the next couple weeks. I think we have a couple in mind, and there's
Mhm.
a lot of options for the next couple ones, so make sure you always stick around for this part. But obviously, it's the first thing that came to mind is just thinking about hockey season and thinking about a packed barn and Centennial Ice Arena with a bunch of people on Thanksgiving Eve. The presentation of that game is just incredible. You look at the lights go off, the players come on. It's just it makes the hair, stand up on your arms, even if you're just in the
Yeah.
stands. Like it's awesome. So I'm excited to see that again, and I'm excited for another season of hockey, Dylan.
Yeah, me too. And like you said, I'm thinking about all these matchups. We have again that state championship rematch tonight, Monday night, between York and New Trier Green, and Loyola New Trier, GBS, GBN. You look at St. Viator and Stevenson. That's a fun rivalry. St. Ignatius and Fenwick, uh, both the double leagues. Whenever those two teams meet up, those games count for both the SHL and CCHL. Uh, there's just so many fun games coming down the pipeline on the schedule, and I just love that we're getting started this early, and we're looking at a packed October and really every month until March until we crown a state champion in each division. Can't wait.
And every week will be a packed week with this podcast. We are going to
Yes.
air it every single Tuesday, record on Mondays. Should go as planned, and you'll get to see new content every week, new players, new coaches, maybe bring back Max a couple of times because he just knows everything SHL. But
Yeah.
it's going to be a very fun ride, and we're glad you're here for it on this SHL Network podcast. We're thinking about an official name. We're going to come up with it soon, but for now,
Yeah.
we're just going to ride with that simplicity.
We're in our
So,
Utah Hockey Club era at the
yeah,
moment.
I love that joke.
But
So for
I just
Dylan,
want to say before you sign
oh
us
yeah,
off,
absolutely.
please comment on this video if you're watching at home and let us know what you want to see because we have these segments kind of worked out in our head, but we want to cater to you watching at home. And do you want to see players come on here? Do you want to see specific game predictions or previews or anything? Just if you have any ideas that you pull out of your brain, leave them in the comments because obviously this podcast is going to be a lot more polished up as we go along. This is episode 1. We're working out the kinks, but we're hoping to make this thing pretty sophisticated here soon. So if you have any ideas, shoot them our way.
Yeah, and don't forget you can always message us at SHL Network on
Yes.
Instagram. That's best way of getting to us other than YouTube comments. So for Dylan Ward, I'm Luke Jorden. We really hope you enjoyed this first SHL Network podcast. We're looking forward to more in the future, but for now, we'll see you next week. Thank you for watching this episode.